In today's episode, we dive into 5 swimmers that were ripped apart in shallow water by sharks. From a spearfisher that attracted a hungry tiger shark, to a graduate student that unexpectedly got bitten by a black-tip shark. But first, let's start with our first story. The morning of July 22, 2015 dawned with deceptive tranquility over New Smyrna Beach, Florida. The sky painted itself in soft pastels of pink and orange as the first rays of sunlight pierced through the scattered clouds, casting long shadows across the pristine white sand. Rebecca Walsh, a 34-year-old registered nurse from Jacksonville, had been looking forward to this vacation for months. Rebecca embodied the caring nature that made her exceptional at her job. She had spent the last 3 years working in the intensive care unit at Jacksonville Memorial Hospital, where her colleagues knew her as someone who never backed down from a challenge and always put others before herself. This week-long vacation at New Smyrna Beach represented more than just time off for Rebecca. After months of working double shifts during the hospital's staffing shortage, she desperately needed this break. Rebecca had been an avid swimmer since high school, maintaining her athletic build through her regular swimming sessions at the local YMCA. What Rebecca didn't fully appreciate was that New Smyrna Beach held the notorious distinction as the shark bite capital of the world, recording more unprovoked shark attacks than any other location globally. The night before Rebecca's final swim, local fishing enthusiasts had spent hours on the nearby pier, throwing fish parts and blood into the ocean to attract large game fish. This practice creates scent trails that can persist for hours and attract bull sharks, which are known for their aggressive nature and preference for shallow, murky water. Bull sharks are considered one of the 3 most dangerous shark species to humans, along with great white and tiger sharks. They can grow up to 11 feet long and weigh over 500 pounds, with a bite force of approximately 1,350 pounds per square inch. Unlike most sharks, bull sharks can tolerate both saltwater and freshwater, allowing them to venture into coastal areas where human activity is highest. As dawn broke on July 22nd, Rebecca followed her established routine. She slipped into her navy blue one-piece swimsuit and headed down to the beach. The water appeared slightly murkier than usual due to recent storms that had stirred up sediment, reducing visibility to about 2 feet below the surface. Perfect conditions for what marine biologists call a mistaken identity attack. Rebecca entered the water gradually, and for the first 15 minutes, everything proceeded normally. Unbeknownst to Rebecca, a mature female bull shark, approximately 6 feet in length and weighing close to 200 pounds, had been attracted to the area by the previous night's chumming activity and had been patrolling these waters since before dawn. The attack happened with shocking suddenness. Rebecca was peacefully swimming on the shallow water when the shark struck her on the side with lethal force, hitting her left thigh. The impact lifted her partially out of the water as the shark's teeth penetrated deep into her thigh muscle, severing her femoral artery, the major blood vessel that supplies the leg. When the femoral artery is severed, a person can lose consciousness within 60 to 90 seconds and die within 3 to 5 minutes without immediate medical intervention. Rebecca's scream echoed across the empty beach as she felt the shark's grip. The bull shark held on for approximately 10 to 15 seconds before releasing her. Typical behavior for this species when they realize their prey is not what they expected. Free from the shark's jaws but bleeding profusely, Rebecca attempted to swim toward shore. The water around her turned red with blood. However, the massive blood loss quickly began affecting her coordination and consciousness. 2 early morning joggers heard Rebecca's initial scream and saw her struggling in the surf. They immediately ran into the water, reaching her just as she was losing consciousness in about 3 feet of water. One jogger, a retired paramedic, immediately recognized the severity of her injuries and began applying direct pressure to the wound while his companion dialed 911. Paramedics arrived within 8 minutes of the 911 call. However, Rebecca had already lost consciousness and showed signs of severe shock. Her blood pressure was critically low, and despite the medical team's efforts to control bleeding and restore blood volume, her condition continued to deteriorate. Rebecca Walsh was pronounced dead at Halifax Health Medical Center at 7:31 a.m., approximately 45 minutes after the attack. The official cause of death was blood loss due to femoral artery laceration from shark bite trauma. While Rebecca's tragic encounter with a bull shark in Florida's notorious waters was happening, another predator was already stalking its next victim in the crystal clear waters of California, where a young surf instructor was about to discover that even years of ocean experience couldn't protect him from nature's most perfect killing machine. The pre-dawn hours on October 14, 2016 brought an unusual stillness to Monterey Bay, California. The marine layer had lifted earlier than usual, revealing a sky painted in deep purples and oranges as sunrise crept over the Santa Cruz Mountains. The Pacific Ocean stretched endlessly toward the horizon, its surface broken only by gentle, long-period swells. And this was a perfect day for Jake Morrison. At 26 years old, Jake embodied the California surfer archetype: sun-bleached hair, perpetually tanned skin, and an easy smile that masked a deep intelligence and profound respect for the ocean. As a surf instructor at Monterey Bay Surf Academy, Jake had built a reputation for his patience with beginners and ability to keep students safe in challenging conditions. His colleagues often said Jake could read the ocean like a book, predicting wave sets and identifying potential hazards with uncanny accuracy. The underwater Monterey Canyon, plunging to depths of over 12,000 feet just offshore, created upwelling currents that brought nutrient-rich water to the surface. However, this rich ecosystem also supported a significant population of great white sharks. October represents the peak season for great white activity in Monterey Bay, coinciding with elephant seal pupping season. Great white sharks are the ocean's apex predators, capable of growing over 20 feet long and weighing more than 5,000 pounds. They possess approximately 300 serrated teeth arranged in multiple rows, with a bite force that can exceed 4,000 pounds per square inch. Their hunting strategy involves ambush attacks from below, using their powerful tail to propel their massive bodies upward at speeds exceeding 25 miles per hour. On this particular morning, Jake had checked the surf forecast and discovered perfect conditions, clean waves in the head-high range. His wetsuit was a high-end, 4/3 millimeter full suit in solid black, designed for Northern California's cold water. From below, this sleek black silhouette would closely resemble a young elephant seal, the preferred prey of great whites in this area. For 30 minutes, Jake caught wave after perfect wave. The conditions exceeded the forecast, with clean faces and long rides that reminded him why he had fallen in love with surfing. What Jake didn't know was that he was being observed. Approximately 50 feet below, a 14-foot great white shark had been patrolling the area since before dawn. This was a mature female, estimated to weigh close to 2,000 pounds, attracted to the area by scent trails from a nearby seal colony. Jake, who was taking a rest in shallow water, was sitting on his board when suddenly the shark launched itself with explosive force, its jaws clamping down on Jake's left leg and hip with a bite force exceeding 4,000 pounds per square inch. The bite caused immediate and massive trauma. The shark's teeth penetrated deep into Jake's leg and hip, severing the femoral artery, crushing the femur bone, and causing devastating tissue damage. The shark released Jake after approximately 10 to 15 seconds and disappeared back into the depths. However, the damage was already fatal. Jake's scream of agony echoed across the empty ocean. But despite the severity of his injuries, adrenaline and his years of ocean experience gave him a brief window of opportunity. Jake began paddling toward shore with desperate determination, using only his arms, as his injured leg made kicking impossible. The femoral artery injury meant he was losing blood at a rate of nearly 1 liter per minute, and that massive blood loss quickly began affecting Jake's system. Jake reached the shore, but the combination of blood loss and physical effort overwhelmed his system. Jake lost consciousness on the shore. A jogger on the beach, seeing Jake laying unconscious and bleeding heavily, ran to him and called 911. Emergency responders arrived at the area approximately 30 minutes after the attack. But even with great effort, Jake Morrison was pronounced dead at the scene at 6:47 a.m. The official cause of death was exsanguination due to femoral artery laceration and massive tissue trauma from a shark bite. But while Jake's encounter with a great white shark demonstrated the unpredictable nature of these apex predators, another predator was already being drawn to the scent of blood in the crystal clear waters of the Florida Keys, where an experienced spearfisherman was about to learn that success underwater can attract the deadliest attention. The morning of May 8, 2017 dawned with crystalline clarity over the Florida Keys. The sun rose like a golden orb over the Atlantic Ocean, its rays penetrating the gin-clear water, illuminating the sandy bottom and the scattered coral heads in the shallow flats. Carlos Mendez had been anticipating this trip for weeks. At 31 years old, Carlos represented the new generation of spear fishermen who combined traditional hunting skills with modern technology and deep respect for marine conservation. He had spent 8 years developing his skills, starting with basic freediving courses and progressing to advanced techniques under experienced mentors. His equipment reflected this serious approach, including a custom spear gun capable of accurate shots up to 15 feet. This morning, Carlos was diving with his younger brother Miguel in the shallow grass flats near Key Largo, an area known for its excellent hogfish and mutton snapping hunting in water depths ranging from 3 to 8 feet. Even in these shallow waters, tiger sharks are among the most dangerous species to spear fishermen. These apex predators can grow up to 18 feet long and weigh over 2,000 pounds. They possess uniquely designed teeth with serrated edges that can slice through flesh, bone, and turtle shells. Unlike great whites, tiger sharks are opportunistic feeders, willing to investigate any potential food source, making them particularly dangerous to spear fishermen who create blood trails. Tiger sharks are notorious for hunting in surprisingly shallow water, often patrolling grass flats and reef edges in depths as shallow as 3 to 4 feet. That day, Carlos and Miguel launched their boat from Key Largo Marina at 6 a.m. as they anchored in the shallow flats in just 6 feet of water. For the first hour, the experience was a success, working with shallow coral heads and grass beds. However, as their success continued, each speared fish released a small amount of blood into the water, creating a cumulative scent trail detectable to sharks from considerable distances. Around 10 a.m., Carlos spotted a large grouper hiding under a coral ledge in about 4 feet of water, roughly 40 feet from Miguel's position. He decided to pursue it alone rather than signal his brother, violating a fundamental safety rule of spearfishing. The shot was flawless. Carlos's spear struck the grouper just behind the head, killing it instantly. But as he secured the large fish to his stringer in the shallow water, significant blood began flowing from the wound, creating a much more substantial scent trail than his previous catches. This is when Carlos didn't realize that his successful morning had been observed by a predator following the scent trail for over an hour. An 11-foot tiger shark, a mature female weighing approximately 800 pounds, had been tracking the brothers from deeper water and had moved into the shallow flats to investigate the blood trail. The attack came without warning in just 4 feet of water. The massive shark's dorsal fin broke the surface as it closed the distance in seconds, its powerful tail propelling its body through the water with surprising speed. Carlos managed to fire a spear gun, but the weapon's effectiveness against fish was inadequate against an 800-pound predator in such confined spaces. The shark's jaws clamped down on Carlos's right arm and shoulder, serrated teeth cutting through the toughest materials. The bite severed Carlos's brachial artery, the major vessel supplying his arm with blood. After about 20 to 30 seconds, the shark released its grip and backed away slightly, its massive body thrashing in the shallow water. But the tiger shark wasn't finished. The second attack targeted Carlos's legs and lower torso, the shark's powerful body creating a violent disturbance in the shallow flats. The combined blood loss from both attacks now exceeded 1 liter per minute, rapidly pushing Carlos toward fatal hypovolemic shock. Miguel, who could clearly see the attack happening in the shallow, clear water, began swimming toward their boat while calling for help, hoping to reach the radio and summon emergency assistance. The sight of his brother being attacked by the massive predator in such shallow water was even more terrifying than if it had happened in deep water. By the time he reached the boat and radioed for help, Carlos had already lost consciousness from massive blood loss and was floating face down in less than 5 feet of water. The Coast Guard response was swift, with rescue boats and a helicopter arriving within 20 minutes of Miguel's distress call. But the search quickly became a recovery operation rather than a rescue mission. The victim's body clearly visible in the shallow, crystal clear water. Carlos Mendez was pronounced dead at the scene, losing his life due to blood loss from multiple arterial lacerations from shark bite trauma in the deceptively dangerous shallow waters of the Florida Keys. But while Carlos was encountering a tiger shark in the pristine waters of the Florida Keys, another tragedy was already unfolding in the crystal clear waters of the Bahamas, where a young teacher's vacation would end in a way that would forever change how locals viewed their relationship with the sea. The morning of March 19, 2014 brought perfect Caribbean weather to Nassau, Bahamas. The sun rose over the harbor, painting the sky in brilliant coral and gold as gentle trade winds carried the sweet scent of frangipane blossoms across crystal clear waters. Water temperature held steady at 78 degrees Fahrenheit, warm enough for extended swimming without protective gear. Jennifer Adams had been dreaming of this moment for over a year, ever since she and 3 college roommates decided to celebrate their 5-year reunion with a Bahamas trip. At 28 years old, Jennifer embodied the enthusiasm and optimism that made her an effective elementary school teacher in Columbus, Ohio. Teaching 3rd grade at Riverside Elementary School had been Jennifer's dream job since graduating from Ohio State University 6 years earlier. But Jennifer's dedication came at a personal cost. She rarely took time off during the school year, often working weekends to prepare lessons and grade papers. Growing up in the Midwest, Jennifer had limited ocean swimming experience. Her childhood summers were spent at Lake Erie and inland lakes, where the biggest concern was avoiding zebra mussel shells. The concept of marine predators was largely theoretical. The group had arrived in Nassau 3 days earlier, staying at a mid-range resort offering direct beach access and water sport activities. Although what Jennifer and her friends didn't realize was that their chosen swimming area had been significantly impacted by human activities that altered local marine life behavior. For over a decade, local fishermen had used a small dock about 200 yards from the resort's beach as a fish cleaning station, processing daily catches before taking them to market. Caribbean reef sharks typically grow 6 to 8 feet in length and are generally considered one of the less aggressive species. They normally avoid human contact and feed primarily on small fish, squid, and crustaceans. However, when they become conditioned to expect food in specific areas, their behavior can change, making them more likely to investigate swimmers who enter their territory. That morning began normally. Jennifer and her friends decided to spend the morning at the beach before their afternoon rum distillery excursion. She wore a bright yellow bikini purchased specifically for this trip, thinking the vibrant color would look great in vacation photos. What she didn't know was that bright colors, particularly yellow, can attract shark attention, as they may mistake them for the coloration of distressed fish or other prey species. For the first 15 minutes, Jennifer's swim was everything she had hoped. The water was so clear she could see tropical fish swimming below, their bright colors creating a living kaleidoscope that took her breath away. But what Jennifer couldn't see was the 5-foot Caribbean reef shark that had been attracted to the area by the familiar scent of fish blood from the nearby cleaning station. This particular shark had been conditioned over several years to associate this area with feeding opportunities. Jennifer's first indication that something was wrong came when she noticed small tropical fish that had been swimming around her suddenly disappeared. The water, which had been alive with colorful marine life moments before, became eerily empty. Confused by the sudden absence of fish but not yet alarmed, Jennifer continued swimming, assuming her movements had simply scared the fish away. She was about 100 yards from shore, in approximately 6 feet of water, when she felt something brush against her leg. The contact was gentle at first, almost like seaweed or debris floating in the current. But when Jennifer looked down, she saw the unmistakable shape of a shark circling below her. Jennifer's panicked movements, thrashing arms, and rapid kicking created exactly the kind of distress prey signals that trigger feeding responses in sharks. The Caribbean reef shark, which had been investigating her presence cautiously, suddenly perceived her as wounded prey and shifted from investigative behavior to predatory action. The attack was swift and decisive. The shark struck Jennifer's leg just below the knee, its teeth designed for gripping and tearing rather than the cutting action of larger species. The bite caused immediate severe damage to her calf muscle, tearing through skin, muscle, and blood vessels. Jennifer's scream of terror and agony carried across the water to the beach, where her friends immediately recognized something was terribly wrong. Sarah, the most water-confident of the group, began swimming toward Jennifer while Michelle and Amanda ran to alert resort lifeguards and beach staff. The shark, having delivered its initial bite, released Jennifer and backed away slightly. Behavior typical of Caribbean reef sharks when they realize their prey isn't what they expected. However, the damage was already done. The bite had severed the posterior tibial artery, creating a wound that was bleeding profusely. Jennifer, despite panic and excruciating pain, managed to begin swimming toward shore. But the blood flowing from her wound was creating a scent trail that continued to stimulate the shark's predatory instincts. The shark, drawn back by blood and Jennifer's continued distressed movements, circled for a second approach. The second bite targeted Jennifer's right ankle and foot, causing additional severe trauma damage and severing more blood vessels. The combined blood loss from both wounds now exceeded 1 liter per minute, rapidly pushing Jennifer toward hypovolemic shock. Sarah reached Jennifer just after the second attack, managing to get her arms around Jennifer and began pulling her toward shore, screaming for help as she struggled against the current and Jennifer's increasingly dead weight. The resort's emergency response was swift and professional. Lifeguards reached the 2 women within minutes, using a rescue boat to get Jennifer out of the water and onto the beach, where resort medical staff could begin treatment. Jennifer remained conscious during the initial treatment, even managing to speak to her friends and medical personnel working to stabilize her condition. She asked repeatedly about the shark, whether it was still in the water, and whether her friends were safe. Emergency medical services transported Jennifer to Princess Margaret Hospital in Nassau. Surgeons managed to repair the severed arteries and control the bleeding. But complications began developing within hours of surgery. The massive blood loss and trauma had put enormous stress on Jennifer's cardiovascular system. Despite receiving multiple units of blood transfusions, her body began showing signs of multiple organ dysfunction syndrome. Despite the medical team's heroic efforts, Jennifer's condition continued to deteriorate. Jennifer Adams died at 11:23 p.m. on March 19, 2014, approximately 12 hours after the shark attack. But while Jennifer's tragic encounter with the conditioned Caribbean reef shark in the paradise waters of the Bahamas was happening, another tragedy was already unfolding along Florida's coast, where a college student's fall break celebration would end in a way that would forever change how his friends viewed the ocean's hidden dangers. The afternoon of September 12, 2013 brought perfect beach conditions to Daytona Beach, Florida. The sun blazed overhead in a cloudless sky, warming white sand to comfortable temperatures. A steady onshore breeze created ideal wave conditions, with consistent 3 to 4 foot swells rolling in from the Atlantic at regular intervals. Michael Chan had been looking forward to this fall break trip for months, carefully coordinating schedules with college friends to ensure they could all make the journey from the University of Central Florida in Orlando to Daytona Beach. At 24 years old, Michael was in his final semester as a business major, with plans to graduate in December and begin his marketing career with the Tampa firm. Michael had discovered bodyboarding during sophomore year when a roommate introduced him to the sport during spring break at Cocoa Beach. Over 3 years, Michael had become an accomplished bodyboarder, investing in quality equipment and spending countless weekends at various Florida beaches perfecting his technique. What made this trip particularly significant was the timing. September represented the peak of what locals called blacktip season, when thousands of blacktip sharks migrated through Florida's coastal waters following massive schools of bait fish. Blacktip sharks typically measure 4 to 6 feet in length and weigh 40 to 60 pounds. They're generally not considered dangerous to humans under normal circumstances, preferring to feed on small, schooling fish. However, during their feeding migrations, blacktips become significantly more aggressive and less discriminating about potential prey. Michael and his friends had arrived at Daytona Beach 2 days earlier, spending their first day getting oriented and their second day enjoying relatively calm conditions perfect for beginners. But September 12th brought the kind of wave conditions that experienced bodyboarders dream about. Consistent sets with clean faces and enough power to provide long, exciting rides. The group had spent the morning exploring the beach and testing different spots before settling on an area about a half a mile south of the main pier, where waves seemed to be breaking most consistently. This location put them in an area that local fishermen knew was frequented by large schools of mullet, the primary prey species that attracted blacktip sharks during their migration. By 2 p.m., Michael was having the session of his trip. He had been in the water for over an hour, catching wave after wave and feeling completely in tune with the ocean's rhythm. What Michael and his friends didn't realize was that they were bodyboarding in the middle of a massive feeding aggregation of blacktip sharks. Underwater, dozens of these sleek predators were pursuing schools of mullet that had been driven into shallow water by larger predatory fish offshore. The attack came without warning during what should have been a routine rest in 6-foot deep water. Michael was scanning the horizon when he felt a sudden violent impact on his right leg. The blacktip shark, measuring about 4 feet in length and weighing around 40 pounds, had struck from below with the speed and precision that made these sharks effective predators. The shark's teeth, while smaller than those of larger species, were perfectly designed for gripping and tearing flesh. When they penetrated Michael's calf and ankle, they caused deep lacerations that severed muscles and blood vessels, creating wounds that would have been serious even with immediate medical attention. Michael's scream of pain and shock carried across the water to his friends, who immediately recognized something was terribly wrong. Jake, who had been bodyboarding about 50 yards away, began swimming toward Michael while shouting for others to call for help. The blacktip shark, having delivered its bite, immediately released Michael and disappeared back into the depths. This behavior is typical of blacktip attacks on humans. They usually deliver a single bite before realizing their mistake and retreating. Michael, despite excruciating pain and the shock of the attack, managed to maintain his grip on his bodyboard and began making his way toward shore. Jake reached Michael just as he was entering the shore break, helping to support him as they navigated the final yards to the beach. The wounds on Michael's right leg were severe and bleeding profusely. The shark's bite had caused deep lacerations to his calf and ankle, with significant tissue damage that required immediate attention. Daytona Beach's emergency response system was well prepared for shark attack incidents. Paramedics arrived within 6 minutes of the 911 call, immediately beginning treatment to control bleeding and stabilize Michael's condition for transport. Michael was conscious and talking during the initial treatment, describing the attack to paramedics and expressing concern about whether his friends were safe to continue swimming. The transport to Halifax Medical Center took about 15 minutes, during which Michael's condition began to change. However, complications began developing within 12 hours of surgery. Despite the successful arterial repair, Michael began showing signs of compartment syndrome in his lower leg. Michael underwent emergency fasciotomy surgery to relieve the pressure, but the damage had already begun. Most critically, Michael began developing signs of systemic inflammatory response syndrome. The medical team suspected that marine bacteria introduced during the shark bite had caused a serious infection. Despite aggressive antibiotic therapy and supportive care, Michael's condition continued to deteriorate. On the evening of September 13th, approximately 30 hours after the attack, Michael went into cardiac arrest. The medical team worked for over 45 minutes to restore his heartbeat. They were successful in getting his heart beating again, but Michael had suffered significant brain damage due to the period without adequate oxygen circulation. Michael remained on life support for 2 more days while his family grappled with the devastating news that he had suffered irreversible brain damage. His other organs continued to fail despite maximum medical support, and it became clear that he would not recover. Michael Chen was pronounced dead at 3:17 p.m. on September 15, 2013, 3 days after what should have been a routine bodyboarding session with friends. The official cause of death was multiple organ failure secondary to septic shock caused by marine bacterial infection from shark bite trauma. He was 24 years old, just months away from graduating college and beginning his career. Thanks for watching. Want to watch more? Click on your screen now.